Hello, hello, hello. My name is Temi Tope Olodo, and we're going live now. Going live on our program where we're going to be talking about very quite exciting issues. So I hope you're here ready to join us on this very interesting conversation. But while we're waiting for our guests to join us, I think it's quite interesting to look at some of the issues that are happening, around the world that has major impact on us, from both a security perspective, in more importantly, with regard to our business, what we do, security. So we know that the opposition party have now, nominated a British Nigerian, Kemi Badenoch. She's now going to be the leader of the opposition party, which is the Conservative. And I know why a lot of BME people are quite excited. I would say to them they need to be a bit more cautious with their excitement because um, when Obama got there, and nobody's going to speak bad of the Obamas, but when Obama got there, there was not really much that was done for the BME community, to be honest. He never even visited, even Nigeria, which is one of the major countries. And many people have reasons to believe that there was a specific reason because the Jonathan administration at that point refused to concede to some of the requirements that the Obama administration wanted them to more comply with. And because of that, Nigeria was more or less punished during the reign of Obama. Of course, people will have different, views and comments on that. But today we're going to be talking about employment security screening, and that's our conversation. But because she's actually going to be the leader of the opposition party, we are going to be seeing some fireworks because she's very furious. She has that Nigerian spirit in her, and she's really going to go deep and dig into the Labour Party. So we wait for that exciting conversation. This is what the media really wants. They want someone like him. We know that on the other side of the Atlantic, we have the ongoing preparation for the election in America, and a lot of the report is that a lot of BME black men are actually going to vote for Trump. And you ask yourself, why would they do that? But they have their own reasons. There's a lot of people that honestly believe that Trump might be able to put a stop to some of the aggressions that is ongoing in Israel in terms of the Israel-Gaza conflict. But more importantly, there are those people that believe that the issue of the Ukraine war will have been resolved if it was Trump that were there. We'll wait to see what will happen there. We'll definitely go to wait to see that. But there is a lot happening, on that front. I'm just waiting for our guests to join us. Okay, just give me a second. Um, okay. Just give me a second. We're trying to get our guest, get to our guest. He's having some technical issues, so we'll try and get to our guest. any benefit for the world. The world might even still get what's the word? Might lose out. If it's Trump, there is the issue about NATO. You know, uh, a lot of concern about NATO, that it might really affect, how NATO operates. More importantly, because Trump has made it very clear that he's not in support of the way NATO is being run in its current status. But we know that most of those things are rhetorics, because immediately when Trump was in the White House, a lot of European countries sit up to make their effective contribution, which was meant to be 2% into the coffers, in terms of their obligations. So they need to meet up with their security obligations in order for NATO to be as effective as it needs to be. America cannot just be the only one, footing the bill for NATO, which is what Trump has been advocating. So we'll definitely say, if you're watching me right now, I want you to like this page. I want you to share it, and then tell your friends that we are live and we are going to be talking about employment security screening. So that's what we're going to be doing. So please definitely tell your friends we're here live. We want to talk about employment. Let's look into the issue of employment, security within the employment space. What does it mean? How does it affect you? Because we know that in the workplace, if effective security is not put in place, a lot of danger awaits both the staff and assets of the organization. So it's not just about the unfortunate shooting of people when they're in the workplace, or unfortunate attack by work members of other colleagues. There are also other issues to do with safety and security in the workplace. There's not just about the physical harm. There is issues definitely to do with mainly largely with regards to leakages of sensitive information. There's insider threat, and we have an excellent article on that I will recommend for anybody. If you're on LinkedIn, that you should more or less, I would say, make sure that you get, because it's really, 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 really good. It will more or less enlighten you about the kind of threats out there that affects organizations and individuals who are in the workplace. So there are things that could be put in place, and these need to be taken seriously from our senior management perspective. So if you're watching this page, I want you to like this page. I want you to share it and tell your friends that we're live looking at the issue of employment security screening. So what exactly are we talking about when we say employment security screening? What we're talking about is very simple. We're saying that when people come into the organization, recruitment should not just be restricted to the initial recruitment and references that we're taking, but the screening should be ongoing. It shouldn't just be stopped at when you're recruiting the person, finding out about their mental health, finding out about their employment, and making sure that the references they've given is genuine, making sure that the places they say they've worked at least have a 10-year check of people's references. Within government is normally within 5 years. In fact, you find out that if you apply for civil service within most Western countries, they want a 5 years history. They want to know that you've lived in the country at least for 5 years. Why? Because they'll be able to detect through patterns, through informations recorded by security services, if an individual have been involved in what they should not be involved, criminality of any kind. But if they don't have that, then it becomes quite difficult. And that's the reason why in some situations, they more or less say that you need to get a police certificate from the overseas country that you're coming from. So if you're coming from any of the African countries into Europe, into America, one of the things you'll find out is that they normally request for you to get a police report. That police report is what would be used to reassure themselves that you are not a person with a serious security concerns that they need to take on board. So those are kind of measurements or things that are actually put in place by organization. Now, when you then complete the initial process for recruitment, you've met the academic requirement, you've met the work complement, you've met the checks, with regard to your identity. What then is important is that the organization inducts you into their own value system. That is very important. And while we're talking about, security, employment security screening, it's not just restricted to just a good person, can he do the work? It covers a lot of things, because criminality in the workplace is not just restricted to security in the workplace is not just restricted to the basic. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you so much. And I've informed our listeners, our viewers, that we had a kind of a technical itch. So I don't know why that was happening, but if you're watching me right now, we're live here in the United Kingdom. I'm here in the United Kingdom, and Mr. Roland is based in Netherlands, where he will be speaking to us from on the issue of employment security. So, but before we go into that, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and where you'll be coming from today with regard to employment security?
Yeah. When it comes to employment security, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about physical security in some respects. We're talking about people in every respect. And I'm looking at it from my background, where I've been in charge of great variety of different types of teams in a different variety of different environments, from, in some cases, quite a lot of different nationalities. So where I'm coming from is from a corporate background, military background, NGO and governmental background, dealing in a variety of different ways with how we address the issue of, some people call it insider risk, is one of the things that we could touch upon. Other people might refer to it as employment screening. But at the end of the day, we are really looking at who can we trust, who is trustworthy, and how can we manage to make sure that there are no bad apples in the barrel, as they say. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I think you hit it on the nail. One of the things you said before you join, one of the things I said before you join is that an employer will be making a big mistake if they think that after recruitment, the security screening stops. There's no need for more screening. And I want you to give us experience from your background in the military, because I know you worked in different aspects of the military. And I know definitely in the UK British Army, they won't say because you've been in the military, now you should be able to see the same security briefings that the chief of army staff will be seeing, or that the intelligence officer will be seeing, or that the head of a platoon going to Ukraine, it will be seeing, even though you're meant to be in Northern Ireland. What is your experience from that perspective?
Of course, the military is a completely different environment. It's a unique environment in many respects, completely alien, even to those other uniformed services like the police, fire service, even the ambulance service, customs and excise. The military is unique in that it is. Obsessed, you might say, at a very low level, and rightly so, with security and making sure that we have the right people in the right place with the right skill set. Let me give you an example. When I joined the military a long time ago, okay, we had just gone past that stage where we wore red jackets, but okay. In my forming up platoon, there were 60 plus young people waiting to join the military on day one. By the time we'd finished our basic training, which was some months later, it was quite intensive training, very physically demanding, mentally demanding, emotionally demanding, challenging in lots of respects. And we're talking here, when I'm saying it's challenging, you know, we're talking to, in those days, in my platoon, it was exclusively male, exclusively. And the culture at the time was that we would have nothing detrimental against ladies being in the military. Of course, things have changed and moved on. But in those days, okay, it was a very masculine environment. And we got all the young lads starting, like myself, and from a wide variety of backgrounds from all over certain regional parts of the UK, because we're very tribal, of course. So 60 plus started, and at the end of our basic training, we were down to 20 something. So 2/3 of those individuals had been weeded out. And when I say weeded out, again, I'm not being detrimental. It's just that for what the military wanted for the specific job we were going to do, you had to fit certain criteria. Nothing wrong with the guys who, again, it sounds as though there's something wrong with them if I say fell by the wayside. It's just not everybody is cut out to be infantry soldier, for example, and all that entails. And later on in my military career, again, I was in part of a selection process for Northern Ireland, for example, were dealing in an intelligence background. We had to be certified as reliable and trustworthy and so on and so forth. But for another job of which I was interviewed and approved for, which I'm not trying to sort of paint a picture here. Nothing special about me. I don't think anybody's special, with the odd exception of Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps, and a couple of others. But I had to go through what we call positive vetting. And I know Temi, my friend and colleague, he will have gone through something similar. But in my case, this had to go up to minimum top secret. And for this particular organization, which I was applying for and which I successfully passed the criteria, my wife had to change her nationality, for example. For example, it shows you how serious this was. And during this screening process, I was interviewed for some time. It was in Berlin, I remember, for some considerable time, over hours, by a very, very senior Brigadier General, I believe, about my background. Questions range, for example, do I like little boys? Have I had any affairs? What's my bank balance like? What's my political leanings? Have I got a criminal record? And not only were they asking me, but they went way, way back to my school, to former employees, employers, etc., etc. So the military take very seriously the question of security. And I know that certain government agencies as well, of course, are of the same sort of fashion. In fact, they may be even more robust when you think of MI6, for example, or MI5 and so on. So yeah, from a military perspective, there's two different examples. One, the first initial introduction to the military, what I was going to do, was very, very challenging physically, mentally, emotionally. And then later on, for work in Northern Ireland, again, there was lots of delving into your background and so on and so forth. But for this other position, which I really can't talk about, again, I'm not trying to make out, I'm not James Bond, nothing like that. But it's not a subject for discussion. But the depth to which they went, the fact my wife had to change her nationality, nobody was allowed in the organization at that time. And the organization doesn't exist anymore, with a wife who was a foreign national, just in case. So that is, it sounds a little bit like a Tom Clancy thing. It's not meant to be. It was just to paint a picture. Okay.
No, you're spot on. And that's the reason why I'm quite interested and intrigued that the private sector, some part of the private sector, so I need to be very careful, some part of the private sector have not caught up on the issue of security screen, because a lot of them have this notion that once you've recruited somebody, you've checked with their previous employer references and say, oh, they're good. Because we know now that employers can't give negative references anyway under employment law in the UK, for example. You can't say, oh, he's a bad boy, don't recruit him. You're going to be in trouble. Or that girl is, oh, she's a troublemaker. If you do that, you're in trouble. You have to be factual. It has to be how many sickness do they have? Are they facing any disciplinary? They don't face any disciplinary, and there's no issue on their record, that you can't say anything, even though you know that they are trouble. And I know from my experience, having worked in at least 4 government departments in UK, that I got up to DV clearance that I was doing before I left the service. And even with my SC, which is top secret clearance, which we were talking about, they went down to my school. They asked me issues about my affiliations. They asked me about my sexual life. They asked me about my bank statements. I have to bring in my bank statement on a regular basis for it to be checked so that I'm not compromised. My family need to be British. My brothers and sisters were checked out, not just me alone. They checked out my background, the school I went to, what I did in the school. And at what point I had to speak to my mentor to say, I think I'm going to step out of this job because I just want to do a job. I could get a job with a higher pay within the civil service where I was working then. There's 2 times that money, and I will not go through this clearance. And the person said to me, the reason why they are asking you all these questions is because if, God forbid, you get picked up by, and I'm just using that, by country A, and they use a girl to entrap you, and then she sends you a message to say, oh, I have this information about you, or one country sends you information to say, we have this information about you. If you do not give us this material, we're going to leak it. You know that somebody else is already aware. The government is already aware of those issues. And that's the reason why they were asking those questions. So thank you so much for opening up on that area, because that is very important. So what are the critical factors that you believe should be considered when conducting an employment security screen? So if you're employing somebody right now, what are the things that you're going to look out for? What should trans be looking out for? Because we've been recruiting a lot of people and we've done a lot of checks on them. But what will you be looking out for in the 21st century if you're going to recruit anybody?
I'll touch on that in a moment, Temi, but just so I don't lose track of thought, I just want to go back to something you said at the very beginning, where it was about civilian, I'll use the term civilian, organizations still haven't got past the idea of screening after the person has been employed. That is a huge, huge mistake. Let me just clarify a little bit where I'm coming from with this. I want you to imagine now, if you cast your mind back to when you were little boy, little girl, whoever's listening, okay? And before you went out, your parents would say to you, no talking to strangers. Every child gets this. Do not talk to strangers. Okay, so you'd go out there and you're wary of strangers, and rightly so. Okay, and then if you think about small groups of people, our ancestors in the past, always, always, always wary of strangers. Who are they? What are they? What are they after? And so on and so forth. It's a survival thing. Now imagine you have a new employee joins the firm. So the new employee who's joining the firm, he or she, of course, is in unknown territory. They may have done their research, looked at the company website, social media, etc., etc., etc. So they are in an environment of which they have no knowledge at all at the moment. And in the same way, the new colleagues don't know this person. And that mindset is the mindset that prevails. It's uncharted territory. But if you've done your preliminary screening thoroughly, then it helps to sort of ease things along, because people will know, well, in our organization, we know from our own experience, everything is how it should be. But that is just at that initial moment in time. Now, remember, Temi, when you were a teenager, I don't want you to tell me any stories because the police may be listening. Oh, okay. But you are not the same person. I'm not the same person I was when I was 18, 26, 35, and so on and so forth. And people change over their lifetime, and different influences affect them. So even though a company may have done a preliminary screening and everything is, as I would say, hunky-dory or tickety-boo, I do like to lapse into English occasionally, real English for my sake. Even though you may have passed those particular tests, that is just at that moment in time and space. Further on, there could be other things that's happened in your life that will change the person you are. You may have been married, or be married. You may have children. You may be in financial difficulties. You may have had some negative influences in your life. You still may have a drinks problem, gambling problem, a drugs problem. And the question here is that everybody is still a stranger. How often have we seen everybody when you say, I would never have thought that person would have done that? You see, when you see murders on the TV, he was such a wonderful, kind, warm-hearted person, and he's just shot dead 5 people. Or she was a lovely woman and she just murdered her kids. So we never really, or do we ever really know anybody? Well, I would suspect not. And the point I'm trying to make, I know I'm laboriously going over this, but it is so critical that people change. And managers, line managers, foremen, whoever, they need to know as best they can the people who are their colleagues. So when I said at the beginning I was going on about strangers, your colleagues are still strangers to some degree, but there are indications that something's not quite right. For example, the person suddenly coming in very tired, bleary-eyed, not being as productive, being grumpy, being argumentative. There could be reasons for that. If there's just a new baby in the house, for those of us who are parents, we know 3 o'clock in the morning, making a milk bottle and so on, changing nappies and the baby screaming and so on, it doesn't induce itself to having a good night's sleep. So if you were aware of that, of course, you now know. But if that isn't the case, then really through the chain of command, and not only the chain of command, but colleagues who are looking out for each other, it should be within any organization say, look, I don't want to tittle tattle again, English expression, but there's something not quite right with Joe, Tom, Sue, Bernadette or whatever, there's something not right. And this should be red flags cause for concern. I just wanted to make that point. The other thing is that there should always be, and we're not talking big brother here, but you have to look out for each other. And of course, it's really quite critical to the well-being of the person, to the colleagues, to the organization. I would then go a little bit further and say, if anybody is going to be promoted or moved into another position where there may be access to more classified information of whatever nature, okay, then another check needs to be done. But I just wanted to make that point, but I'll go back now to the question you asked, Temi, is what should organizations be doing when we say from the onset. So the first thing I would say is that when an organization is going to recruit people, the first thing that they really need to put in place is to define the job requirements precisely. Okay, it starts with the company. So outline the skills, experience, qualifications that are needed. So those people who are applying for the job know the criteria. I would then very, very carefully, when you get all the CVs coming in and cover letters and so on and so forth, filter out those candidates who don't fit the bill. It's a weeding out process. Again, this is done by the company. And I when I've been in this process where I've been interviewing people for jobs, I meticulously went through everybody's CV and cover letter. Because I said to my colleagues, I said, these aren't pieces of paper. What you're holding in your hand is a person, okay? And that person, we have to give them the benefit of the doubt until we've delved into their background and to make sure, because it's a person's life we're dealing with here, and we want to make sure that we due diligence and we give them a fair chance. So that leads on to sort of background checks. Now, in this day and age, and I know some people will say it's not right, and I've got mixed views about this actually, but looking at it from a company point of view, should a company look at your social media, your Facebook page, your Instagram page? I'm having fun and games with Instagram at the minute. You may have noticed. I'm trying to sign into it today, and it's putting up so many barriers. Maybe it's my aftershave. I don't know. But you can say, well, that's my private personal life. Well, yes and no, it is your private personal life. But once you've said on Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on, you have put it in the public domain. So it is then open for scrutiny. It's a little bit like when the police are looking at a crime scene or investigating something. If you throw something in the bin and it is retrieved, no longer your property. The police can then use it. I know legislation in different countries is slightly different. So you really need thorough background checks. And sometimes, of course, you may have to employ certain agencies, commercial, or depends on what your role is, to do these background checks for you, private detectives and so on and so forth, looking at everything that makes you you. So background checks, reference checks, of course, I think, we still ask for referees. Normally it's 3. So when the referee said, this person is really should be canonized as a saint, because he or she is all singing, all dancing, no fault. There isn't a person amongst us, I would suggest, not being detrimental, but we all have our skeletons in the cupboard, some of them are tiny skeletons, and so on and so forth. But, if there is a glowing report, way, you will know from your experience dealing with people, it's OTT, for me, that makes me a little bit more diligent in saying, well, this person. So really, the reference checks needs to be done. And I was quite surprised, my 2 sons, when they've been applying for jobs. In the old days, when you applied for a job, you'd have one interview and that was it. But now, you get interview one and interview two, and then you have to write an essay on the situation in whatever do you think, and then you have skill sets and all sorts of things. So depending on the job, of course, but are the tests that the companies having you do, are they beneficial? Are they giving you the right feedback to make sure? And I sometimes think, we're going to end up with a situation where, for again, not being detrimental, but for starter positions, you might say, where it used to be in the past, you didn't need a degree. But now it seems having a degree isn't enough. You need a master's degree. And will it be in a few years' time, having a master's degree isn't enough? You need a PhD. And it goes on and on and on. So the companies, a lot of it is down to the companies making sure that what they're doing is suitable for the task. The other thing, of course, is compliance with law. Each country has different cultures, different legislation, and it needs to be that whichever way you're screening or whatever delving you're doing is in compliance with the law. We know in the UK and Europe, what's it called, GDPR, where certain data is sacrosanct and you can only be released and so on and so forth. So there's that thing. Again, when you're doing the interviews, I've interviewed people and I've been interviewed, and we normally would have a panel of 3 people. There would be the person's immediate boss, somebody from HR, and then somebody else brought in. Before any interview, the panel need to know who they're looking for, what they're looking for, and make the questions relevant and be probing, but and it's a two-way street. Because the person who's been interviewed can also ask questions, and you can pick a lot up from body language, demeanor, the way the person's dressed, and so on and so forth. The other thing is, of course, is consistency, and I know this is a subject that's been looked at recently when we're talking about consistency. When the person walks through that door, he or she should be treated no differently from anybody else. Okay, so no discrimination, no bias, nothing like that. So consistency to make sure that everybody is treated the same and it's a level playing field. Confidentiality, of course, is an issue where companies need to be very, very careful. They'll take information, and what question they should ask themselves after the interviews, unless they say to the candidate, do you mind if we keep your CV on record and so on, in case another position comes up and so on and so forth. And if they agree, all well and good. But if they say, well, no, sorry, didn't get the job. Okay, thank you very much for applying. Then their personal details are no longer your business and everything should be destroyed. It's a thing that companies should go down that road. I would always have in a company environment as well what I call a feedback loop. So every so often, and this is not just for screening, but across the board, you always need a feedback mechanism to make sure that you are complying with the law, the questions are relevant, the people who are doing the interviewing are not abrasive and winding people up. So just general questions of that nature. You may also think I can write to those candidates who didn't get through. Of course, they might be a little disgruntled and be a bit negative, but sometimes in the negative comments, there may be a grain of truth. Saying, what did you think about the onboarding process? What did you think about the interviewing process? And so on and so forth. Security clearances, of course, are a completely different kettle of fish. Because as you mentioned and I mentioned, Temi, depending on the role, on the company, on the environment, and so on and so forth, and you should be told in advance if you're applying for this position, be aware, no stone is left unturned, and what might come to light, you might not like what come to light. And that should be the way that they organize themselves. Honesty and integrity, of course. If a
Yeah,
person's lied in the CV
yeah,
and so on and so forth, I've seen examples of it when I've been interviewing people, and I've thought, but you wrote in your CV, and then you can see them starting to unravel. Say, but no, I can show you. You see, I've got a copy of it here. You categorically said da da da. So are you now saying that's just a little bit being liberal with the truth?
yeah,
Again, it comes with experience, learning how to interview people, so on and so
exactly.
on.
Exactly. They
Anything?
definitely, that is quite interesting. You did mention the relationship between our public life and employment screening, and that is quite important because I was speaking to a young person recently who was telling me that a friend lost a very, very important job because they were on Facebook saying some things that had security implications, and the organization saw it and did not go through with the application because the application of job they were going for was a security related job, and they've done something, you know, on Facebook like a live chat where they be talking about things that they're not supposed to be talking about, or not talking about the things they're supposed to talk about in a academic setting, which is the beauty of LinkedIn because it allows you to write in an academic setting. But there are certain jobs that don't even want you to be that visible. So young people particularly need to be spoken to with regard to their engagement and usage on social media because employers will check those places out, check what they're writing on, and if what they're writing on does not align with their values, they will reject. Then you talked about flagging earlier, which is a question I wanted to ask you. You said that no, what red flags and warning signs do you look out for during a screening process? So, if you're screening somebody, what are the red flags you'll be looking out for to say, "Oh no, this one is not coming. I'm not employing this one. No, this one has questions to answer."
Yeah. One of the things I would look for is, of course, it's you've read the CV and you've read the cover letter, and you may have looked at social media and so on and so forth. So you have an image in your mind even before the person walks through the door of what that person is or isn't. But
Definitely.
that's just a lot of it is supposition.
Hmm.
Okay. And when the person walks in, there's the body language, the way they dress, the demeanor,
Yeah.
the way they talk, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. And I remember, I'm phrasing this in a neutral way now. I was part of a panel of three, and the person or the people we were interviewing would be somebody who would be in my team. So you can imagine I was quite keen to get the right fit. And when I'm talking about the right fit, I'm talking about, well, will this person's personality uh, be okay within the team, or will it be abrasive or whatever? So I'm looking at that, for example. I'm looking at what they currently do, and I'm looking at how they are dressed. For example, if somebody walks in and for this particular job, we were looking for somebody. It wasn't a high level job, it was just somebody who would deal with certain things. And if they were wearing very expensive jewelry, a Rolex watch, Savile Row suit, Chinese silk tie and everything, I was be thinking, well, how can they afford this?
Yeah.
If they turned up driving a Porsche, all these things you look for. And when they're waiting some people might find this strange, when they're waiting to come in, how are they with the receptionist or the people who are doing them coming in? Are they friendly? Are they chatty? Are they a little bit nervous? Obviously, they may be a little bit nervous. So I'd be looking for things like this. And then as we go through the questions, how they answer the questions. Is there any hesitation? Are they giving the answers even before I finished the question. Are they
Hmm.
mentally reading from a script? And I know everybody prepares for an interview. You'll go on Google, what questions might they ask me? And then blah, 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 and they'll rehearse and so on. And you expect that to some degree, but if everything is like that, then I'm starting to think, is there a real person beyond the script that they're reading? So it
Hmm.
would be a sort of red flag I would be looking for. And also in the questions which I would be asking, I would be looking for indicators to find out beyond the CV, beyond the cover letter, what have you really done in your current place of work? In one particular case, individual talked themselves out of the job because they told me, well, we have a certain bottleneck in the company where I am now, and it leads us to lots of problems and so on and so forth. So I asked the person, well, does it affect you directly? Oh, yes, it affects me directly. It creates a lot of work and so on and so forth. So then I took it the next logical step. Well, what have you done to solve this problem? And I was so surprised by the answer, nothing. I've done nothing. And I was thinking, you are in this job meant to do this. This is creating major, major problems for you. And you've
Hmm.
done nothing. So not
That's
very
sick.
proactive and just talked yourself out of the job. So it depends on the position, Temi, what the person's being employed for. But you know yourself. I mean, imagine you go to a party, or you're sitting beside somebody on the bus, at the bus stop, on the train, and you have a sort of gut feeling, oh, this person's quite chatty, quite friendly. Or you
Yeah.
see those other people, you think, yeah, I don't really want to talk to them because, they just look as though they're hyper, or they're not
Hmm.
altogether there, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. So you sometimes have to go with your gut feeling on this and think, I don't know what it is. I'm not quite certain, but there's something not quite right. Now, if there are going to be follow-on interviews and everything else is okay, this is where I would put in the initial report for the first part of the employment process something not quite right. Let's see if we can discover what that is as we go through. Um,
Definitely.
that sort of thing, gut feeling in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We're getting towards the end of the program now, and we've been talking to Mr. Roland Stockton about employment security screening. And I wanted to ask you because most companies don't know where to start from. I think that's where they know how to recruit whoever they want to recruit, but they don't know what to do with regard to induction, putting in place workplace security protocols, policies, and procedure. How do you think trans could help here? They should be engaging with trans, I believe so,
Mm.
and we might be able to help them out. What do you think?
I think so, because this particular subject we're talking about at the moment, this is just a snippet and just a tiny little part of one particular lecture that I have on physical security, where I cover all aspects of physical security. So this, what we've just discussed now, is tiny little part of one lesson. And when it comes to physical security, I currently have, I think it's 13 lessons on different aspects of physical security, where we discuss all sorts of things, what we just discussed now, and so on and so forth. So I think TRAS, we could offer to those companies a lot of training in with respect to physical security, cyber security. I also have, and I know colleagues have a wide range of lessons, some of my colleagues in TRAS, on a lot of business related, dealing with a multicultural team,
Yeah.
cross fertilization, cultural awareness, dealing with problem people. We have a lot of lessons about emotional intelligence, active listening, physical security, cyber security. I got an old portfolio of lessons I have, and I know my colleagues, Chris, who you may have seen on other
Yeah.
chats, Temi, and we have other colleagues who've not spoken yet, but will do on different areas. We have such a wide range and depth of knowledge to share with you all. You only have to liaise with us, and we can give you the off the peg training, of course, which is very comprehensive, but also we can do bespoke training that meets your particular needs.
Thank you so much. We've been talking to Mr. Stockton, Roland Stockton, about employment security screening, and this program is live on LinkedIn, live on Facebook, and of course live on YouTube, so you could watch the replay. And if you need us, of course, our details are strolling at the bottom of the page. This program comes up every 3 p.m. Of course, please note that there are time changes, from one country to another. We're doing it 3 o'clock here in the UK. It's 4 p.m. in Nigeria, and and different in other countries. So of course, you could watch it again. So that is definitely going to be the end of the segment. But before I end the segment, I want to leave the last word to Mr. Roland, who might have one or two things to say. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, go back to the beginning of this talk, which I really enjoyed, by the way. I love these talks. It's my Saturday treat for myself. I like to reach out to everybody and help as best I can. Remember when I said that when you were a child, don't talk to strangers. And then remember, we went a little bit further on. My advice would be in your workplace, nobody should be a stranger, but be aware that you're never really aware of what's going on in people's lives, and just try to think a little bit more about them. And if you notice something not quite right, then bring it to somebody's attention. It could very well be that those people really need some help. And sadly, we've seen cases in other countries. The Americans had an expression, going postal, where people have been under a great deal of pressure, and they've shot their colleagues. Of course, we don't want that to happen, and we don't want anybody to fall by the wayside. So let's look out for each other, everybody.
Okay. Thank you so much, and we'll leave it at that. Look out for everybody this Saturday. Call your friends, call your in-laws. Make sure you engage with somebody today. When it comes to work-related issues, if you need training, advice when it comes to HR security, get in touch with Trans. We are here to assist you. We are Trans Intelligence Security, so intelligence and security solution, and we have 300 plus years experience among ourselves. But we have colleagues in South Africa, colleagues in Netherlands, as you know, colleagues in the United Kingdom, in Kenya, and Nigeria. So we are not just an organization that is restricted to one continent. We operate in 3 continents: in the United States, in Africa, and of course in Europe. Until we speak to you next time, it's bye from me from the United Kingdom.
Bye from me in the Netherlands.
And speak to you soon, and see you next week this time. Do not change your dial. Bye. God bless.
Nice to meet you all, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.